Grief is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm a founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode brings real conversations with people around the world who have navigated grief and discovered the strength to create new inspired beginnings in their life. Together, we'll walk from grief to empowerment through stories, practical tools, and actionable insights. You'll uncover the hidden gifts within your grief, reclaim your personal power, and step into a future fulfilled with courage and hope. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. Her name is Jessa Reynolds. She's a creative, chronically ill, neurodivergent chaos coordinator from South Carolina. After more than 2 decades of unexplained pain, she finally got answers: endometriosis, Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, ADHD, and endometriosis. And even after all the medical answers, she still had to work through the trauma that came with that. And now she's healing out loud through the Inner Grace Project, where she talks about medical trauma, motherhood, faith, and figuring out who you are after life doesn't go the way that you plan. Equal parts heart and humor, Jessa's mission is to help women who've been quietly unraveling behind closed doors feel seen, heard, and understood and less alone. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys. Jessa, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Thanks so much for having me on. I am so excited about this today. This will be a good chat.
I am too, and I just want to say I love the title Chaos Coordinator. I love that. Where did you come up with that?
Stay at home mom just doesn't cover it. It is a chaos coordinator. That is much better, much better.
When I was in the finance industry, everybody like kind of made fun of stay-at-home moms for whatever degree. And whenever I was talking to one, I was absolutely baffled at how many things they could multitask and keep track of at the same time throughout the
Yeah,
entire day. And I was just sitting there going, you guys are like a miracle worker of some kind to be able to process all of that. Because I
it's
would talk
it's a
to
lot.
yeah, I mean, I would talk to moms that would have like a screaming kid and they would be able to have a full conversation and be taking care of that at the same time and then talking
Mhm.
about their finances, buying a home. And I was really impressed. So I just have to say that I personally like chaos coordinator over stay-at-home mom.
Right? I mean, it's cool, right? I like it. Uh,
It just makes you sound like you can take on the world and you got it. And that's what I love about it.
and that
So
really is with moms anyway. I mean, working or stay at home. That's what it is we are coordinating all the chaos. Everything that doesn't even have a label or a category. We got it all.
exactly. Well, Jessa, to get us started today with our listeners, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about yourself and about your background.
Absolutely. So I was really excited to come and talk to you today and look at my story, but really um, to kind of zero in on it from that grief aspect of it. So I started having severe pelvic pain symptoms when I was 11 years old. It took me until I was 28 to finally get a diagnosis of endometriosis. Um, it was a very different walk of life for me, because not only did I have endometriosis, which so many women do have that. There's about 6.5 million women in the US alone that have endometriosis. It's like 1 in 10 women. But to have it and have issues with it from such a young age and to not get diagnosed for so long, it was really hard. There, there's so many different symptoms that go with it, but it is not just period pain. I had just started mine when I was 11 and then having issues with it already. I had doctors tell me I was too young to have endometriosis. That's not a thing. I had doctors tell me so many different things that just weren't true. And these are trained professionals. There's so much misunderstood about the disease itself. And then when you added in that I was 11 coming in to deal with it, the journey was incredibly difficult and hard for me and for my family.
Yeah, I can't imagine how hard that would be to go that many years without a medical diagnosis, let alone a doctor that was willing to understand where you're at and meet your needs at that point. I mean, that's just It's
It was,
it's kind of hard for me to fathom how much struggle that must have been and how much grief was attached to that.
yeah, I mean, because it's I expected to be able to go to school and, then make friends, hang out with my friends, have a full life. Um, and I ended up having to be homeschooled actually by high school because the public school was going to keep me back because I had been in and out of the hospital so much, my attendance wasn't enough. And even though my grades were there, they were going to hold me back because I'd missed too many days. So my mom ended up taking me out for high school, but I was already isolated way before then because even though I was enrolled in school, I was I was having so many longer periods of not being able to function because of the pain that I missed a great deal. Not to mention all the times that I was actually admitted into the hospital where they're trying to figure out what's going on. Um, and nobody would look at endo, but that I would be admitted to run tests, and the amount of medical tests that I was put through from a young age, it was incredibly just wild how much I was put through between the testing and the medications and everything. I was so isolated and so miserable. I was absolutely miserable, and I grieved deeply the life that I saw other girls my age having.
I think that's what's hard at such a young age that when we're in our child stage and our teenage years, we kind of see the world as this big open canvas that we can paint whatever picture we want on it and ultimately chase after it. And I can't imagine how hard that would be to go through all of these medical issues, all of this testing, all of this being removed from school because of all the pain and just not being able to participate as a normal kid at that point. And really, the hard one too that grief comes with is isolation. That's a big thing that's not even talked about much in the grief space, but grief can be very isolated in ways that you just feel really removed from the world and can't participate.
Absolutely. It is you you get into this shadowed place. It's a darkness that's almost within us that we tend to sit in, and that's where I was for so long. Um, because of what my body was doing from such a young age and not understanding, I really did not love myself. I hated my body. I hated my body. Um, and so on top of all of the physical illness comes the mental struggles with that from such a young age. So that isolation, I was in a pretty terrible mental space for a long time. And I think that's another thing that is definitely not talked about enough with endometriosis as a whole, is the mental health aspect of it and the grief of what we go through not being able to function in our own bodies.
I think that's a big one. And I saw in your bio, by the way, you're a fellow ADHDer like
Yeah.
myself. I was, I say welcome to the club, not in a fun way, because it's a challenging thing to have, and it makes it a little bit harder for us to focus in some ways or even be present in life. It's very, very hard for us it takes a fight sometimes to just be in that normal lane at times.
Yeah, it really it gets interesting. And I was not actually diagnosed with that until I was 33. I'm 30. I'm almost, that was just last year. So,
But I just got diagnosed with that a couple months back. So I'm with you. I learned it later in life when I probably
yeah,
had been walking around with this thing my whole life and not really known or paid attention. And I think to your point, what you've been sharing so far in the story is that if we had learned about these things sooner, if we had gotten those resources and that help that we needed a little bit sooner in life, and I try to caution with when I talk about things like this, and even stories you're talking about, is we're not looking to identify with a disorder. We're not looking to identify with some label from the medical field. But what we are looking for, by the way, is to more deeply understand what is going on and what kind of options we have to
right.
better manage our symptoms and ultimately like you said, we're taking off our course in life that we wanted. Well, how do we live over here now, and how do we adapt ourselves to live and function a life that we're actually happy with?
Absolutely. It's that's the thing, is that it's not so much for the label, but for the resources and the tools that come along with it.
Yeah, that's a struggle I found in my recent journey when I was trying to figure out ADHD and a couple other things is, I had people bring up, I had a therapist bring up one time, are you just looking for a label? And I'm like, no, I'm trying to understand myself. Trying to understand why I do things a certain
Right.
way or why, and I can't imagine with you with endometriosis, by the way, having pelvic pain for, I mean, since 11 to 28 and going, I don't know why, I don't know how, I don't know what's going on with this or why this is happening.
Hmm.
And if people go down that road of looking for a label, it's like, well, no, I'm trying to understand what the heck is going on so I can put my finger on it and say, are there some things I can do to manage this? Is there some intervention medically I need to do with this? Does this affect me short term? Does it affect me long term? I can't imagine all the questions that might have been rolling around in your head for so many years.
Oh, there were so many. And I think also looking at it with my mom, because I was her child, right? At the time, she's having to take me to all of these different doctor's appointments. We're searching for answers. It took up most of our time trying to find answers for almost 2 decades. So it, it really, yeah, it's very isolating. It is. It's not so much that we just need that label, but we have to have answers to be able to move forward when we are that, especially when we're dealing with things that are that heavy to where I can't go to school, I can't function. We need answers.
And I wanted to ask you, how did you deal with that isolation and grief? What were some coping mechanisms you might have used, or what were some ways you navigated that? Because I know for everybody it's a little different, and
Yeah,
I'm just curious what worked out well for you.
for sure. So I my mom and dad actually ended up getting me my first dog when I was about oh gosh, I think I was about 14. And that dog was so much of what kept me through with the grief, because when I was that isolated and I was looking for answers for so long, I would have so many dark moments where I just didn't feel like I could keep fighting anymore. I wanted to live. I want to live this beautiful life, but I felt like I was just banging my head against a wall continuously. And sometimes you do, you just want to give up. And having that dog with me several different times is what actually brought me out of that dark place. So it's sometimes it's love. It is. It's the love of an animal, of my family, that kept those things from getting too dark. Um, it was love.
I'm really happy to hear that because that's something that I don't hear too often as a response to grief. But I do feel like grief is a lot of love with nowhere to go. And when we can find something like a pet, I got two pet rabbits that are crazy. I love them to death. They don't like me as
Love
much, but
your
that's
pet
fine.
rabbit pictures.
But like you said, getting a dog and having something to take care of and something that will actually be there for you when you're having those moments, I think is a great way. Not as a distraction, but I see it as purpose. I see it as something that gives you a leg to move forward with on your journey.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest things for me too with getting through it. I mean, I'll be honest, until I was about, I got diagnosed at 28, and I was already married, but I didn't really start to heal until I had my daughter.
Mm.
It is love that heals us for sure, and that purpose of love.
I love that. And did your medical conditions you went through, did that play a role in you being able to have a family?
So that played a huge role. I did not think I would be able to have a child. I was told I most likely would not be able to. Um, my daughter was a miracle, truly. We found out that I had something wrong with my uterus, that it was actually upside down and inside out or something. It was all messed up. So I had to have a surgery
Mm.
to correct that. And then I was told I would still need probably several rounds of IVF to be able to conceive. And somehow, really the first time that we were cleared after surgery, I was able to conceive. So it was pretty wild. And because it was so close after surgery, and I was still so sensitive, I actually I went to the hospital thinking I was having pain and what was going on, and that's how we found out that I was pregnant, and my numbers were so low. They said that I probably actually felt the implantation. So that
Wow.
was kind of wild. But she is a miracle. It was a rough, very rough pregnancy for me. Because of the Ehlers-Danlos, my ligaments did not want to keep her above my cervix. So it was very painful the entire pregnancy. And I had very bad hypertension the whole time. So by the time I was 34 weeks, they ended up having to induce because she was no longer growing. I ended up having preeclampsia. It was just terrible. She was
Wow.
born 6 weeks early. She was only 3 pounds and 12 ounces, which is even smaller for what she should have been at that time. Um, but she made it. She made it, and she is my tiny warrior. And we ended up in the NICU for 3.5 weeks. I was in the ICU for 24 hours after I gave birth, and then admitted into the hospital for 2 weeks after that, and had to have a couple blood transfusions. So it was a rough, very rough entrance into the world for her. But she is happy and healthy and one of the tallest kids in her class.
That's incredible. Gosh, the story you just told, it's a miracle this to even get pregnant in the first place, and let alone go through that rough of a pregnancy and to have a healthy, happy child. I mean, that's a
it was
beautiful miracle in its own right.
it was, and my endometriosis specialist still to this day calls her the miracle baby.
Oh my God. That's too funny. And I was going to ask you about that. I don't know anything about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and I know we talked about endometriosis. You wrote adenometriosis as well.
Yes.
What are those other conditions, and what did
Yeah.
that play into with your medical issues that you were facing?
So, endometriosis was the very first diagnosis that I received. And that one came when I was 28. Endometriosis is a condition where uterine, the same type of tissue that grows inside of the uterus and the lining, can grow in other areas of the body. And when it does that, that can be lesions, things like that. It's gonna, when it tries to shed back out. So it is very painful. Um, and adenomyosis is very similar. It's like the sister disease, but it actually is within the uterine wall. It's not just anywhere. So it can grow anywhere in the body, but most of the time it is going to be in the pelvic region. Um, then so those two, endometriosis, there is no cure because, like I said, it can grow anywhere in the body. The adenomyosis, because it is limited into the uterus, once you have a hysterectomy and have the uterus taken out, that is the cure for that.
Mm.
And I will say I had a hysterectomy in 2020, yeah, 2023, and I was pain free for like 3.5 years. So that was much a big needed relief. However, the endo can still come back if it's grown far enough out of those reproductive organs. So it could grow out, and the only thing that really helps to treat that, because there is no cure, is excision surgery, where they go in and they cut out the lesions. Now, for Ehlers-Danlos, that is a connective tissue disorder that works throughout the entire body, and one of the biggest markers for that is hypermobility. So very double jointed, stretchy skin, um, unstable joints. That's the big one, unstable joints. But it affects a lot more. There's different types of Ehlers-Danlos, there's some that will actually affect the heart and can be quite dangerous. There is some that affects just overall body. That's kind of where I have it. Is just they call it the little H EDS. It's just mainly the hypermobility, but it can cause a lot of other random issues. And the biggest thing that I've learned with Ehlers-Danlos is that patients who have Ehlers-Danlos never just have Ehlers-Danlos. They tend to collect different illnesses. They always have more than one thing. It's very common for patients who have Ehlers-Danlos to have comorbidities. One of the most common ones is POTS, which is post ortho. I'm going to say this wrong. Post orthostatic tachycardic syndrome, which is when your heart rate goes up too fast if you're changing positions. So
Mm.
somebody who might stand up and they can just fall right out, or if
Oh, wow.
you have really high levels of pain, you can pass out. So that's something that I possibly have as well. I was never actually officially diagnosed. I'm still going through testing for that one. But that is one that comes common hand in hand. And there's also been a lot of anecdotal evidence and research going into seems to be a lot of women who have endometriosis and Ehlers-Danlos. And they also tend to be neurodivergent in some way, either ADHD or autism.
That is very fascinating that one disorder can be linked to other comorbidities that happen.
Very odd. And it's but the whole thing with Ehlers-Danlos, when doctors are in medical school, they are taught that uh when you hear hoofbeats, right? You don't think zebras, you think horses. That's what they see when they see these symptoms. You're not going to think something out of the box. You're going to think, what do these symptoms line up with? You think horses, not zebras. Well, in our case, when you hear hoofbeats, think zebras. We're going to be the oddballs. We're going to be the off ones. Our body does weird things. We tend to have a lot of different allergic reactions to different things. Our bodies are wired different. We are the zebras.
Well, I've learned as fellow zebra, we're cool people. We're just, and that's something that I try to get away from in the grief community a lot is there's this, I've come to find that I don't like the word normal anymore.
Mm,
I don't really like it because everybody's grief experience is different.
absolutely.
And as you've shared today about all of the medical things you're going through, endometriosis, Ehlers-Danlos, having ADHD like me, um, there's so many people out there that have different things going on with themselves. And I think we forget a lot that there's 8 billion of us walking the planet. We all have different disorders, different diseases, different morbidities, different body types, I mean, everything, genomes, the whole deal. And
All unique. Yes.
so when I say like, when everybody tries to clump it all into like, here's what normal looks like, I go, I don't even think that exists, and it never
Yes,
did,
it
um,
does.
to be frank. So.
Yeah, it's that one. And then in my side as a patient, one of my favorites is when doctors tell me that things are rare. And I'm going, well, then it probably means I have it.
I love when doctors say that because I'm like, and what is your definition of rare? Like when my grandfather got cancer and they said rare, and I said, well, how rare are we talking? And they go, well,
Yeah.
4% of leukemia patients. I said, well, leukemia patients is a pretty big long list right now in society, and 4% doesn't look like this. It actually looks like this, and
Yeah.
we're not acknowledging that. Kind of like you said about endometriosis, 1 in 10 women have that.
Yeah.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I'm really bad at statistics, but that's a very high number of women that have that. It's
It's
not,
190 million women worldwide.
whoa, that's a lot. That's so that's why I don't like that people say like it's rare or it's one off. Well,
Right.
no, it's really not. It's
Really not. That one for sure is not rare. And I've heard that Ehlers-Danlos is rare, but maybe it's being around in these type of groups. Obviously, I'm going to be meeting more of them, but I certainly have met lots of people who have it.
Yeah, well, that's what, I found out when I lost my son, Caden. I thought stillbirth was a very one-off, like doesn't happen very often, rare thing. I was
It's
so far wrong. It is happening more often than people talk about. Um,
And for some reason, unfortunately, in the US, we have a high infant morbidity rate.
We really do. I mean, I found out, kind of like you were talking about endometriosis, I found out after the fact months later that over 120 or 180,000 babies every single year are stillborn or miscarried and are just in our country, not even globally, but in our country. And so that's why I'm very passionate, like you are, when doctors say things like rare and normal.
Yeah.
I'm going, I don't really know that I believe that because I think it's much more significant than you want to give it credit to. And that,
Yeah.
by the way, is hard because it makes me question, how many women out there are going through endometriosis? How many parents, by the way, have lost a stillborn like me? And they're walking around saying, well, I must just be the odd one out. I must be that neurotypical thing. No, you're not. You're more common than you think, and you're not as isolated as you think you are. And I wish we would just, draw more attention or create more awareness to, make people who are going through those things not feel so isolated and one off, like there's something wrong with them, but to say, this is something predominant. This is something that is happening more often. You're not alone. You have a support group here of people who are actually going through this. And I feel like, especially with everything you have going on, there's got to be, shoot, thousands of people just like you that are going through these things. And, maybe your doctors aren't giving you the full story, but by meeting those people that are going through the similar walks, they're going to say, oh, I went through that. Here's what I learned. Or, oh, did you know about this resource? Or, hey, did you think about this? That's where
That's
those
essentially how I was finally able to get a diagnosis.
Yeah, I think it's through the help of other people going through these things that we come together as a collective to help
Mhm.
each other. And that also, by the way, helps these medical professionals step out of the boxes of, normal and fine and rare and puts them in a place of, okay, let's acknowledge this for once. Let's discuss this for once. Let's be open-minded for once. Let's, as a
Yes.
collective, get out of the statistics for a minute and actually listen.
And I think that's something that it really needs to happen more and more in medicine because they forget that they're treating people, not numbers. And I know the science is important and I know those statistics are important for research, but you have to remember that you are treating people and people are all different.
Yeah, that's, I laugh when we're talking about medical stuff because what comes to my mind as you're talking is all these pharmaceutical commercials I watch on TV, and I absolutely laugh because they say,
Mhm.
well, we'll treat this one condition, but you might get cancer, you might screw up your brain, it might stop your heart, it might kill your pancreas. And I'm sitting there going, so we're going to treat this thing here, but we're going to add five more new
Yeah.
things over here. I'm like, that's not, back to your point, that's not treating people as people. That's really, playing the numbers. And I've always shared too in the medical community, because people don't think about this. All these drugs they give us, all these procedures they do for us, it's all based on a subset of numbers. It's a study group of 1,000 people or 5,000 people. And out of that small group, by the way, is where we get those percentages. So when they
Right.
say, 1 in 10 women get endometriosis, well, that's over a survey of X amount of people.
Yeah.
They're just doing
I
statistical
guarantee it's
data.
here.
Yeah, they're just doing statistical data to say, well, we think it's this much, but that's where I'd say we've got to be more mindful to know that that 1 in 10 number very well could be small. It very well could be. It could be much bigger than we know.
Oh,
Um, though without us having open conversations like you and I today, we may not ever actually fully explore that and understand it.
absolutely. And especially when you're looking at things of how each person is individual and the how many women have endometriosis, but yet it wasn't women in general aren't really even being studied in these studies until like the 90s. So
Yeah.
there's a lot. I mean, there's so much that wasn't considered.
So I want to ask you another part about the grief journey, because I do talk to people who are married. I've talked to people who are not married, and something that I've found with married people is that spouses become a very vital role in support and helping them through their diagnosis, helping them through that condition. I was there for my grandfather through all his cancer treatments, and my God, I don't wish cancer on anybody. That was brutal. And so I wanted to ask you the question, how supportive has your husband been or your family, people around you? What has it been like to have support as you've been going through this after getting diagnosed?
Because I am so incredibly lucky in my life with my husband and my family. My husband is my rock. He he kept me out of some very dark places all by himself for a while before I was diagnosed and after. And the amount of extra things that he takes on to help me, especially now as parents, when I'm down, if I'm having a rough physical day, he picks up so much of the slack of things that I can't continue with. And he also still is there to be the rock, that light when things are dark. And I I would not be here today without my husband helping me with so much of it. And my mom, it still baffles me how much my mom had to go through. Me dealing with this is awful, obviously from a personal perspective, but I could not imagine as a mother having a child that was in that much pain and you could find no answers for your child for so long. My mom is amazing, absolutely incredible. And if it was not for the support system that I have, I would not be as well as I am, because this disease or these diseases, they take so much of your functionality. I haven't really been able to keep a long-term job because of missing so much. You never know when you're going to have a flare. You never know when it's going to be a bad day with pain. So it can be incredibly difficult to keep jobs, especially when you haven't been somewhere. If you've been having this issue longer than you've had the job, they're not going to really, you're not protected with FMLA or anything like that. So it's it's hard to even get through 1 year to get the protections, to be able to have those rights. Women and people with chronic illness have a very difficult time keeping up with income and things like that when they can't. They're not actually protected under FMLA or things like that. So thank goodness for my family, or I would not have a roof over my head or food to eat.
Yeah, well, I think having a strong support system is a very, very big thing. And, like you brought up today, and I'm very grateful you did, that whole isolation factor with grief. And even when people are going through chronic illness, isolation is just, it's very, very hard. I honestly think it's the biggest challenge most of us face when we go through grief is not, I come back to that whole thing of not feeling seen or heard or understood. And you're right about jobs, people. Well, somebody may look at somebody like you and say, "Oh, well, you're just unreliable." Well, no, you're not unreliable. You have an uncontrollable condition that we just can't know when something's going to flare up. We don't know when there's going to be pain so bad one day. You're not going to really know what it is.
Right.
I was laughing as I was watching this episode of this new show called The Paper. It's like an Office reboot or something.
Yeah, I saw something like that, or an ad for it.
Yeah, and there's a scene where they're product testing things, and the guy Oscar is the accountant manager, gets this like ab workout thing that like sends electric shocks into your abs or whatever, and he's like sitting there going, and he's like feeling pain, and this woman walks by, a big black woman in the office walks by, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, this is hard." She goes, "Oh, give this to me." And she
Mhm.
goes, "Oh, you only got this on a 3?" And he's like, "Yeah, it hurts." He goes, "Oh, honey, this ain't even close to pain." And so anyway, she literally puts it on and says, "You just turn it up." And he turns it all the way to a 9 out of 10. And
Mhm.
she's like, "Yeah, that's about period pain right there."
Yeah.
And Oscar's like, "What? Like, how are you even doing this right now?" And she's like, "If you want to know what kind of pain we go through, that would be it. So you can wear this at a 9 for the day." And
I
it was
wish
such
every doctor in women's health had to do that.
Well, it was just kind of it was refreshing. I'm only bringing it up because of what we're talking about, but it was such a reminder of him being like, "Oh, being a woman can't be that hard with that pain." And then like once he got an idea of it, he was like, "Okay, ch opinion
Yeah.
changed." Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, it's eye-opening for sure. It's been a very isolating road at different times for sure. And I'm sure you've dealt with this with your grief as well, but when you it's a type of thing that you don't want to talk about too much because you don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. But at the same time, if you don't talk about it, you're isolating yourself. So it can definitely be
yeah,
hard thing to go through. And it was very much, I've even had people tell me that I talked about being in pain too much. So it can be hard.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, Jessa, I'm sorry somebody asked you that. I don't. You know, for somebody, that's what I try to share in the grief space is when we don't walk other people's journeys, when we don't live in their bodies every day, we don't understand what they go through. And so
Yeah.
it's not fair for us to judge other people. And
Yeah.
I can't imagine, by the way, how much pain you live. I really can't. I can't really comprehend it. I know heartbreak really bad, but I don't know what it's like to walk through your
I
shoes.
mean, that's the thing. And I don't know the grief that you carry either. We can't ever know. Even if we were dealing with the same thing, it would be completely different. You cannot know what somebody else is going through in that way.
So I did want to ask you that question about pain because everybody deals with pain a little bit differently. And I laughed when my wife was giving birth inside because she did not get I forgot what you call it, it makes
Epidural.
you, the epidural. She was supposed to get it at 6 centimeters dilated, waited till 10, and the nurses were like, this is unreal. Like, no woman does this kind of thing. Which I have no, I can't really relate to what that actually is, but they were all impressed with it. I wanted to ask you from your situation and your standpoint, you know, what are some ways that you manage pain and what are some ways that you're able to, are you able to use medication for that, or do you have like breath work, or you know, there's some ways that you manage and cope with pain?
So, because I've dealt with the pain for so long, there has been a lot of different things that I've tried and used. Um, but even when I was younger, they had me on pretty heavy narcotics for a long time. And that just, that added a lot of other issues. And unfortunately, it was needed at times. The pain was absolutely that excruciating. But um, I have since found doing things like breath work and things like that can help me more in the long run. That might not take the pain down as much, but it does help me deal with the pain better, if that makes sense. I've learned to stop trying to get the pain to go away. It's not going to go away, but I have to learn how to manage with it and function with it. So a lot of meditation, a lot of praying, a lot of breath work, and trying to learn how to be with my body. And I will say a lot of different supplements and herbals that can help as well. But that is a lot of what I lean on, um, mainly because these days they don't offer much to help with pain with endo. There is one medication I believe that has actually been approved with the FDA to treat endo. It's called Orlissa, and
Mm.
that's the only one I think currently that's on the market. I may be wrong about that, but other than that, it's really just the excision surgery. They can't do a whole lot else to help with pain from a medication standpoint. Um, However, there's also physical therapy. Pelvic floor therapy is fantastic for women's pain. Just cannot say enough about pelvic floor therapy. I love that option. Um, and dealing with it, just having to breathe through it one day at a time.
Does the pain that you go through, I'm just trying to get an idea of it. Does your pain fluctuate on, or does it kind of, is it like in the background, like it's always there, and then there's certain days it comes rearing forward and it kind of goes back and forth, or what's it
That's a
like?
really good way to put it, actually. It's kind of, for me, it does seem to be always in the background in some degree. Even if it's not painful, it's almost like an annoyance. And then it will flare up, and I will have excruciating pain to where I am in the fetal position crying. So it
Wow.
definitely goes back and forth. And before my hysterectomy, it was obviously it will get worse at different times of month, but it doesn't always match your cycle. So it's not a period illness. It really isn't.
And so that's my other question for the pain. Does it stay intense for, hours or days on end before it goes down a little bit and goes in the background, or is it kind of like a short-lived kind of extreme pain and then it goes away? What's it like from that
I've
standpoint?
had the extreme pain like really extreme pain. I've had it last for a couple of days. That's put me in the hospital before. It was that bad for days. Um, and then I've had it to where it'll be that extreme for hours at a time, and then I'll get a few hours of a break, and then I'll have it again for a few hours, and that'll go on for months. Um,
Jeez.
so it's pretty rough.
And I know before we jumped on today, I know you said you had a flare up recently before we jumped on the podcast. How has that been for you the last few days? Have you been able to manage it, so to speak, or has it been kind of causing a more of a rift for you from
Oh,
that
it's
standpoint?
been causing some issues for sure. I'm having pelvic pain again, and we're not for sure that it is the endo is back. It is possible for endometriosis to come back after hysterectomy, but to confirm that, we would need to have another surgery. So we're still going through a lot of the different things and trying to see if we can find something else to help with the symptoms instead of going straight into surgery. But it's definitely gotten in the way, and because of that cramping pain being back, my body is going through so much more stress. It set off a flare with my Ehlers-Danlos, and
Mm.
actually the last 3 mornings in a row I've woken up not able to move because my hips were in so much pain, and I had to sit there and like massage to be able to actually get out of bed for a good 10, 15 minutes before I could actually move and get out of bed. So that's been pretty rough. And managing that right now, it's a lot of guesswork working with my endometriosis specialist. And I have a Ehlers-Danlos specialist appointment coming up. So I have to wait weeks, months in between appointments. And we just kind of manage the best that we can. Lots of heating pads and hot baths.
That for some reason that sounds pleasant when you're going through a lot of pain. That's do your doctors, do they prescribe you medicine all the time for that, or do they recommend more naturopathic ways of working through that? What do they try to recommend for you?
Very different based on what doctor. For a really long time, I've put it in myself that I don't want any narcotic medications. So sometimes it, it depends on what we're dealing with, but at the time, but like I sometimes muscle relaxers can help. There's different ones of those that you can use. There are different medications that I can be given. Don't always, it depends on the doctor. It really depends on the doctor and what they're comfortable with. Personally, I really like more naturopathic remedies and things like that, so I tend to go more towards those things on my own. But yeah, there's all kinds of kinds. It just depends on what doctor you get usually.
Gotcha. Well, Jessa, I wanted to spend some time as we get close to wrapping up the podcast here, talking about the Inner Grace Project. Tell me a little bit about that, how you started it, and what inspired you.
Yeah, so it's a little bit it's been a bit stagnant for a little bit since I have been dealing with all of this again. But it started as I was starting to look into social media, uh, because as a job, I was helping other small businesses do their social media. And I started realizing that it was a really great outlet for me to work through all of the trauma that I've dealt with, from the life that I didn't get to have and the life that I did end up having. So I've started to kind of use it almost as an open journal. And I wanted it to be a place where I can share how I'm healing, the things that I'm learning on my healing journey, and a, a place that I can just kind of welcome all people who are trying to go through their healing journeys and the full look of it, not just the therapy sessions, not just the the good cute quotes that go with it, but the ups and the downs and the whole messy middle.
I really love that because that's one of the things I found in the grief space. You either see people with what I call toxic positivity, which
Yeah,
I'm not a fan of that.
me
I
either.
do like to see, I like to see people share the realness in their stories because I think that, we all are going to face grief. We're all going to face loss in life. We are all going to, what was hard for me when I lost my grandfather when he passed away in front of me was realizing I'm going to be there one day, just like
Yeah,
everybody else. And to hide or shy away from those things by throwing toxic positivity in the window
yeah,
is
it doesn't
really
help.
it's denying ourselves the reality of life, and it's denying ourselves an experience to grow. And so I love that you're sharing in your project just the realness and rawness of, hey, today is not fun. I'm in a lot of pain, lots of it, and here's what's going on with this. I think that just makes you more authentic and just more real and a little more easily accessible to women who need help and support from somebody who actually gets it.
I hope so. I really just feel like if I can share my story and help one other person, then that's what it's about, right?
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing a little bit about your project. You'll have to keep me posted about that. And if you'd like to send me the link when we get off the podcast, because I'll put that
Sure,
in the show notes so people can connect with you from there.
absolutely.
So, well, Jessa, as we wrap up the podcast, I just wanted to say a big thank you to you for coming on today and being so vulnerable and open. I absolutely love that about you. And I can tell you have a big mission because of everything you've gone through, that you're going to be a big spokesperson and a big wealth of information to other women who are going through these same similar medical outlines. And not only just letting you be a resource to them, but giving them the ability to have a voice and to speak up and not sit in the background or sit in silence and suffer, as I like to say, but to speak up and say, I'm going through this too, or I might be feeling these things as well. Uh,
Absolutely.
being an advocate. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. I really loved being on today, and I always enjoy our chats, and I just love seeing what you're doing with the podcast, and so glad to be on today.
Well, thank you. Well, I wanted to leave the podcast asking you one question really quickly. For all the women out there who might be going through endometriosis, the women who might have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, for those women that are going through that might not feel like they have a voice or can speak up or might be struggling to find a doctor that will listen and treat, what is some advice you would share with them or some kind of tips of help? What would you share with them?
For sure. My very first thing that I always tell a woman is, don't go to an OBGYN. Go find an excision specialist for endometriosis. The only way they can really definitively diagnose it is a surgery. And the best treatment for it is excision. So go, don't don't do all the different surgeries. Just go straight to a specialist, and then you only have to have the one procedure. And also, if you feel that you are being dismissed or your doctor is not listening to you, find a new doctor. Go through as many as you need to until you feel like you are being heard.
I think that is such beautiful advice, and I get a little passionate about that one myself because I have had a hard time with doctors, and I cannot I cannot express enough what Jessa just said, by the way. If that doctor is not making you feel seen or heard or understood, not giving you the time of day, or is
Yeah,
not listening to you, go find somebody else.
right.
It's not worth waiting, as Jessa's told us
Absolutely.
today. she had to wait from 11 to 28 years old for a diagnosis. That's a long time to not feel seen and heard and understood, and to go through as much pain as you've gone through. I just applaud you for the strength it takes to be you and go through that. Your journey has been one of lots of pain, but you're now an advocate for other women to stand up and be confident and get the help that they need. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners today for joining Jessa and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode has resonated with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Jessa's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to our podcast. You can tune in at Apple and Podbean. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.